So we're back with Mina Demian of Grind AI, formerly Platform Calgary and Innovate Calgary. He's been in the system for the ecosystem around for the past 10 years. And in episode 2, we're talking pitches that get you funded. Everyone loves to pitch. I was in the pitch the other day with Startup Court and I was watching people pitch. I have feedback on that, but I'll take that off camera. But my first question, non-dilutive versus dilutive funding. You talked a bit about it in episode 1, but I just want to just explore that from a point of differences, advantages, disadvantages, newcomer in the country, first time, no credit history probably, or thin credit history, which is better, just that sort of thing. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks for the question. So question is, what's the difference between non-dilutive and dilutive funding? And one word comes to mind, it's ownership. When it comes to non-dilutive funding, you retain full ownership of your product. So let's walk through the options. You've got grants, as we talked about in episode 1, which are Alberta Innovates, IRAP, Shred credits. Those are essentially, you don't give up any of equity share for your company. You don't give any royalty. Essentially, it's the government of Canada saying, we're going to greenlight this product because you're bringing economic opportunities to Canada. That's the way that I would frame it. In that same vein, in terms of non-dilutive funding, is also loans. So you can go out, get for example, BDC is a very popular loan, especially amongst newcomers. You have, of course, the drawback on that one is that you're paying interest. It's just a regular loan that you go out, get it from the bank. Huge advantage on the sense that when you go out and get a loan from BDC, you establish the fact that you've got a business plan, you establish the fact that you have an opportunity to really turn $1 into 2, and you basically prove out your hypothesis saying that within X amount of time, usually it's a year, maybe 6 months, I'm going to be able to pay back with interest this particular loan. So you really want a framework, the way that you want to think about this particular loan as you have to have, and this is something that I always impart to a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with, direct line of sight to revenues. If you don't have direct line of sight to revenues, perhaps it might not be the best idea to get a loan. You might want to establish that direct line of sight to your market before you go out and get a loan. And of course, like I mentioned, grants are a really good way to establish those networks and utilize some of the funding that's available for Canadian entrepreneurs in order to kind of gain access to those dollars. So that's non-dilutive funding. Now let's move into dilutive funding. That's when I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with the fact that you can go out to pitch. You mentioned Founders Pitch. There's also Startup TNT is a really good, very early market stage events that happen in and around Calgary, all around the prairies, in Edmonton, everywhere. They're really fun events, and you basically get to see someone on stage saying, "Hey, I am so-and-so, and I'm looking for funding," and they basically say what they're looking for funding for. So you get to see all the innovative products that are actually being pitched in Alberta. It's a really good way. It's completely free of charge, great community to be a part of. Highly encourage the networking component. Now, the advantage of going to a Startup TNT event, and I'm not here pitching Startup TNT, but when you kind of start to see the patterns of where you should be spending your time, maybe Startup TNT might be one, because it's a syndicate of investors, meaning that anybody can be an investor. I think the minimum buy-in is about $5,000, and then they basically pool the funding, and at the end of that pitch event, they basically get that particular investment with, of course, equity share associated with that. The reason why I think that those events, there's a lot of them, Platform Calgary, at Edmonton Unlimited. These events are important because you will network with an investor. Someone in that building, someone in that room is an investor. Whether it's to your left and to your right, you can actually start to interact with some of these folks. Now, let's get back into what that means. So you're looking at dilutive funding, which means that if you have a company and it's worth X amount, you're basically giving up 5% 2%, whatever the agreement is. It's usually done through an agreement called a SAFE. And essentially, especially at the early stage, these agreements are saying, hey, I'm going to value your company as X, and I'm going to provide you with 5% of revenues, 5% of the company itself. And so you want to consider those opportunities as really great opportunities if you run into the right investor. I could talk endlessly about this particular subject, Dozy, so please cut me off. But
I'm enjoying it.
I'm going to give you like the cheat sheet to this, is that folks who are newcomers, who are going to go out and fundraise from non-dilutive sources, whether it's a syndicate or it's an individual angel investor, even BDC, some banks have investment departments, is that you want to find someone who fully understands your product or service. Like, that's the biggest hack. I have seen it so many times where someone's trying to establish, and I'm going to give you a practical example just because I've seen this so many times. So many of my of the entrepreneurs that I work with from Nigeria in particular understand how challenging it is to move money overseas. It is so extremely challenging. So they've established really great innovative products to stop, like, how do you move money overseas? How do you ensure that it's safe? How do you ensure, like, there's some really great products out there from a lot of the folks that I work with. And not a lot of people understood how challenging it is to just move money overseas. Yeah. And so you want to get in with the right group of investors, VCs, individuals, angel investors that understand exactly how big this problem is and what the market size is. It's a huge problem, and I'm certain that someone is going to figure this out, and whoever's going to figure it out, it's going to be a very lucrative opportunity to solve. But all that to say is that I've also seen it where I see a lot of VCs who aren't familiar with the problem scoff, or like, this isn't something that they're really interested in. That's fine. Take a quick no and move on. Yeah. Like, that is the hack. Don't waste your time with VCs who are saying, okay, well, once you've hit this milestone, then come back and talk to us. A lot of that sometimes is just Canadian politeness. Sorry to say this. It's one of those things. It's like, let's move on. Let's keep them updated, add them to your mailing list, create a quarterly update, but don't spend too much time with that, because you could spend realistically 3 months full-time fundraising, and without a guarantee of any kind of investor. So I would say the best bang for your buck is establishing a product where you've got customers, you've got early market traction, you've got wait lists, you've got subscribers. Then you can go into a VC and be like, here's the proof is in the pudding. If you want to come along on this journey, great. If you don't. I'm going to answer your second question right into it, because I think it was such a good one, which is, how do you actually establish a pitch so that you can do it in a 30-second pitch? So really, really simple, straightforward. I know this sounds too simple, but honestly, it does work. A lot of entrepreneurs that I work with get hung up with their features and their incredible ability to go to market and whatnot. Nobody cares. Just talk about exactly what it is that you're selling. So I help nonprofits who are struggling with fundraising through my product, grantsease.ai, and it helps folks write perfect grants every single time. So that's what I'm like. That's a perfect opportunity to say that this is exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm building grantsease.ai, and that's who it helps. So we help ideal customer profile who struggle with specific pain point. That's the framework. It's really, really simple and straightforward. A lot of people kind of get hung up in their own heads. And so you kind of just want to say that that's your initial pitch. That's when you're saying that's 2 seconds. That's essentially who Mina is. And now you've established, okay, so Mina is going to help me win grants if you're a nonprofit. And that's essentially how he does it, is through grants.ai. And then you can establish the fact that, unlike writing it on your own or just utilizing ChatGPT, we have this proprietary technology that helps align funder language with individual language and delivers 90% outcomes of success. So there's who we are, how we win, and the proof is in the last few months, I've established at least 25K. Within the last few months, and we hit traction. We've already got 5 subscribers, and we're going to reach very easily, very quickly, over $100,000 worth of grants that have been successful. And so that's the proof: who we are, how we win, and the proof is in the last X, we shipped milestone and hit traction. I'm going to stop there because I know that this is probably a lot of things to consume if you're listening to this for the first time. But that's essentially the framework for a perfect pitch.
The question, what I kept thinking about is you're saying that is something tied to what you said earlier on about the pitching to the VC that understands you. And I really like the pitch framework you just structured out, you just shared right now, the 30-second framework, and the different steps to it. And I'm just wondering, and this is there might be no answer to it, but one is, from your experience, how do you sense when I'm getting into a space where this VC doesn't get me? Sometimes you don't read someone, you walk into a room and you start talking to folks, and maybe you meet someone, looks great, but probably doesn't understand your market. One is, how do you sense when a person doesn't get it? And you just kind of move on. You don't need to go through the whole process. You just kind of, you don't waste time. So I do these, and then you take a look. If the person is not connecting, you do the second one. Do you go through the whole framework, or do you just go you know what, this person doesn't get it, just change the conversation and walk away?
Yeah. I think you're probably going to get different answers from different advisors. And honestly, I've talked to a lot of angel investors and VCs who say, no, establish a relationship with me, hit your milestones, and then come back and talk to me. And they'll probably, a lot of times they might be right about that. But what I've seen personally is that when a very hopeful entrepreneur is coming up to an angel investor and talks about the pain point that they see in the product that they're trying to build in order to solve that pain point, if the angel investor or the VC is just completely unfamiliar with that particular product and the problem and the pain point that it exists, yes, it's up to the entrepreneur to educate that VC with the total addressable market, and the serviceable addressable market. So you need to really know your numbers. But there's also an aspect of things where if it's not in their thesis, then it's not in their thesis. So what I mean by thesis is that some entrepreneurs are saying, some angel investors or investors are saying, we only work with B2B businesses. We only work with, business to business SaaS products, software as a service. That's all we work with. And so here you are talking about a service that's provided to customer, and customers are going to provide you with funding, and that's the revenue model that you have. You've kind of wasted your time. Not wasted your time, but at least maybe that's not something that you should pursue. Move on to the next investor that actually understands the value proposition that you're bringing. So that's what I would say, is that understand the VC or angel investor's investment hype thesis, so that you are really laser targeted on people who understand the problem and want to help you solve it.
Yeah. Now to market sizing. I feel like this conversation has different layers to it, and some of them are not for this place. So I'll move on from that. But how do you, especially when you're building a product that the market size is a bit not exactly on the radar of a lot of people, because the person can understand the problem but might not understand the market size. So how do you quantify that market size? Because for example, using the Nigerian example that you mentioned earlier, I decided to build a product that helps me move money back home. That market is Nigerians, for example, who are trying to send money back home, or who do work with people back home and send money to them. But how do you quantify that in such a way that it attracts the attention of a Canadian VC who has probably heard about it but doesn't exactly understand what the market is? Because to him is, I don't really get that. How do I say to you that gets you okay, that sounds interesting,
Yeah. Establishing the market size and communicating that evidence for angel investors and investors, VCs, is a bit of a challenge. The methodology or the terminology that they use is TAM, SAM, SUM. So total addressable market all the way down to your serviceable addressable market.
Yeah.
And one thing that I can impart on everyone who's listening to this, newcomer entrepreneurs, as well as any kind of entrepreneurs, is that I always a lot of the advisors would say bottom up is better. Some people say up, down, all that kind of stuff. I'm very much a pragmatic kind of person. So if you can say that my serviceable addressable market is X there. So for example, let's talk about the Nigerian finance of trying to move money overseas. You want to know exactly what the population is of newcomers as well as expats who are living in Canada currently, and they have trapped amount of funding in Nigeria. You want to know your numbers there, and you want to know the granular level of how many of those type of individuals live in Calgary, how many of them live in Alberta. You just kind of want to know your numbers specifically. But the way that I would approach this in terms of market size and understanding how big this market could potentially be is understanding your serviceable addressable market. Like start from the granular level of people that are in your network so that you understand these are the people that I'm going to contact right away. I've already done some customer validation with them. We've got a lot of folks with wealth that's trapped out in Nigeria, and they need to move it here, establish themselves, and invest in the Calgary marketplace, but they can't due to financial regulations. If you can establish very simple and precise ways to get those numbers all articulated, I think you're in really good shape. Try to keep it as simple as possible, but also with that direct line of sight of like, these are people in my current network right now.
I think it goes to your point about you need to always have like a direct line of sight on where you're going to make money from, and I think it doesn't just apply for I'm applying for a loan. I think it also applies for doing the business. Like, okay, where am I going to get money from? Because then it flows into every single other thing. Who you pitch to, who you talk to, it just flows into everything. You're rounding up this right now, and I have two more questions for you. One is more like a very straightforward question. The other one is the one which is, what's the biggest pitching mistake you see people make repeatedly, especially newcomers, like newcomer entrepreneurs who they've been here for maybe 3-4 years, but they still make these mistakes when they're building their pitches together, putting their pitches together. Like, what's the biggest pitching mistake you make? Like the one thing and I understand these objectives is not subject. It's subject in the sense that it's Mina's point of view, and so that but what's the biggest mistake you see folks make when they're putting together their pitches?
I do believe that a lot of the pitches that I've seen from newcomers have assumption that if they hit the milestones that the VCs and the angel investors have initiated, that it's a meritocracy and that would initiate the actual funding coming through. But again, I think that the biggest mistake in terms of the pitch isn't necessarily the pitch at all, but it's the assumption that the pitch will lead to investments. I've seen people pitch months, take out, half a year of just nothing but fundraising. But what you want to keep in mind is that Calgary's and Alberta in general is still a market that's being established. It's not quite as established. I know that we started the first episode with the fact that Calgary and Alberta itself is not San Francisco, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's also not Nigeria. I know how incredibly advanced Nigeria is. I know how incredibly advanced India is. I know how advanced Egypt and Cairo is in terms of investment dollars that are flowing through. Alberta, although that there's a lot of hype here, it hasn't actually followed through. So the one thing that I would say in terms of pitching is that understand that this takes time, and it's about more establishing relationships than it is even about the pitch. So although I mentioned, you want to get a VC that understands what you are pitching, it requires, I remember one angel investor just mentioned, like, they need about a year of really getting to know you. So just like the incentive for VCs and angel investors is that, yes, they want a 10x return on their funding. Everyone does. But they also want to establish you as a newcomer someone that they can trust. And what I find really fascinating is that some of the most brilliant minds, newcomers that I've ever worked with, have this uncanny ability to actually establish this trust, but they forget that these relationships take time and these relationships require a lot of effort. And so the coffees, the lunches, they're not just transactional, they're actually establishing a relationship where there's a two-way streak. Honestly, that would be my biggest takeaway on from what I've observed over the past 3.5 years of all these investor pitches is that the ones who kind of stick with the investor and saying like, oh, like their eyes glimmered or their eyes widened when they started to understand how big this problem is in the lucrative market. And if I stick with this individual and I continue to cultivate that relationship, you start to realize like, oh, this person's really genuinely interested, but it always requires way more time and way more relationship building than a lot of newcomers really anticipate.
You know, this thing you just said is something I'm coming to realize about a lot of things in life. Everything takes time. Mm-hmm. But like I watched a movie where someone I think it was a druid or something. She said humans don't have a lot of patience. We're never patient enough about stuff. Newcomers especially, we're usually not patient. We think we're out of time. We want to kind of get going. Mm-hmm. And it also feels like the Silicon Valley has kind of kicked off a certain kind of approach to building business in the sense that everything just needs to happen very quickly. You can get funding right now and just kind of go from zero to hero in 2 years or 3 years. But then you go to markets that are not exactly that developed and you just find out that everything just kind of takes time. Like I would love if we moved faster and if we saw more traction. But I think that there's just that reality for me that things just take way longer than we assume they take, you know. And this is not about whether it's good or bad. It's just like that's the reality I'm just coming to realize. Things take really long. I think the last thing is, do you have like a pitch structure template you want to share with anyone who's watching this? Like it could be a file they could download later. Like do you have one? Or do you have some pitches out there that you think, because I know there are sites that share pitch decks or something, I believe. And if you have one that you're like, oh yeah, I've seen this one and I really liked it. If you have, let me know and we'll add it in the show notes after.
You know, my philosophy on things, Dozy, is that you want to use the tool that's best for you. There's so many tools out there in terms of pitch decks and whatnot. I'm a firm believer. I know not a lot of people believe this, but really cater towards the funder or the VC that you're about to talk to. So that if you're talking to a VC that has invested in products like yours, you've got the right thesis, you can find so many different templates. And I do have templates and I'm happy to kind of share links. I run a blog with businesspath.ca, my consulting firm, and I have a multiple amount of information there. I'm happy to share that. But I also kind of really want to impart on newcomers is that the only way to kind of get ahead, and to your point, Dozy, which is actually brilliant, which is it takes a lot more time than anybody can anticipate. One of the best quotes that I came across recently that I keep on my phone all the time, which is, I think it's from a famous artist, and it says, God will sell you anything at the price of labor. So just remember that, you know, the more labor and time that you put into all of this, it's going to be worth something. You're going to learn something, something's going to come out of it, but labor. Yeah.
Gosh, that's such a good place to end this. Like that's also for myself, honestly, with the newcomers. Like you have to put in the work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And that's it for episode 2. For episode 3, Mina and I will talk about how do you build a Canada-focused GTM strategy? You know, the biggest thing I want to understand here is what does he think is the most underutilized customer acquisition channel in Canada? I mean, his examples are probably going to be about Calgary and Alberta because that's where he's worked most of the time. But I suspect that this example will also cut across most of the country. I'd have to adjust a bit, but I think it will count. You know, how do you price for Canadian versus US markets? How do you test your marketing channels if you're bootstrapping? You know, how do you validate product market fit? Because again, it's a smaller market, and so the approach is very different. So see you there.